Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this monthly in-depth ag forecast for AgSouth and Ag Carolina Farm Credit. All right, we got a lot to discuss, and sometimes, man, it just feels like a month going between when we talk is just too much time because so much can happen in those 30 days, and I'm anticipating a lot happening in the next 30 days. I'm going to tell you something. The most important thing that I'm watching for you all, not just now, but for the next several months, I'm talking all the way through the hurricane season, is going to be the net position of the Bermuda high. I think it's going to be critical, and I'm going to talk to you about it, show you where it is right now. We're going to try to make a case for where that may be out into the middle of summer. Now, right now, okay, you're looking at a couple of drought maps. I do not have any evidence to tell you that you're going to slide back into some sort of epic drought. All right. Now, I understand you have all coined the term, we're always a week away from drought. I get that. I really do understand that. But the good news is that over the last month, we've seen up to a 2-class recovery in our drought. Now, April was not so kind. Overall, April was extremely wet throughout parts of the Mid-South, getting over into the southern plains. And at times, we had a large ridge that sat over parts of Florida, which kept a lot of North Carolina, coastal Georgia, coastal parts of South Carolina dry. And we actually saw a degradation in the drought while this area continued to flood. Just to keep you aware, there was drought that developed in parts of Nebraska. There was even some really dry pockets in Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin that folks were really getting concerned about what was going on with the crop in those areas. And they still are because of how cold it's been as of late. It's not gotten this crop really jumped off to a good start, but it's early. The crop has plenty of time to recover. We're mainly talking about a corn and soybean crop here. But once we got further into the month of May, we really started to bring on the precipitation. And here's the big thing that's happened. This is really kind of a fascinating thing to study. Since the beginning of May, this is what the jet stream has done. Now, the blues represent troughs of colder air aloft. The reds are ridges of warmer temperatures aloft. And the jet stream has to flow in between them. And it's done that. That has been the net position of the jet stream since the beginning of May. It's gone over a ridge here. This is a big one, and this one up here. In fact, I'll show you what's going on in this one in just a few moments. Well, what's happened to the south of it is that we've gotten these cutoff lows that have taken their dear sweet time to move across the country. And in May, several of those brought much of the southeast multiple days of very wet weather. In fact, there's another one right now that's trying to bring rain into the area as I'm recording this. And these big, deep cutoff lows have been an interesting component to this year's overall drought risk. Now, here's what's interesting about it to me. We thought that the jet would run north early this year, but I did not foresee back when forecasting in February and March that as we got later into spring, we'd have these slow-moving lows that would have access to a lot of Gulf moisture. And many of them have come right over the top of us in the month of May, which is why May is turning out to be one of our wettest. Take a look at these precipitation ranks by climate district for the month of May. While sections of the Corn Belt and the upper Midwest have been dry, and the West Coast has been dry, we've had just exceptional amounts of rainfall coming out of Alabama, getting into Georgia, North and South Carolina. In fact, a lot of single digits in here would mean that since 1893, when records began being kept with consistency, we are looking at, well, there's one district through here that's having its wettest start to any May on record, and that's through the 26th. Now, what's interesting about this is that you'd expect when things are this wet for the crop to look really good from outer space. In other words, it tends to look really green. But I went out and looked at some NDVI data, and I've masked the background map to only show me where there's crops being grown. So if I kind of zoom out, you'll see it a little bit better here. So you can kind of see these are the areas that we're going to be looking for crop. And if we come over here into the southeast, you can see your most densely areas in terms of agricultural productivity run right through here. Purely just the shape of the geography and topography of the southeast. I love this. You can see the coastal plain versus the Piedmont versus where we are forested and where we have mountains, right? So it's really kind of neat to see that. So let's start in Georgia. So if you look in, in Georgia so far this year, our NDVI values are just a hair above where they were last year. Now, again, this is only for the crop area. Yet with all that really, really wet weather we saw earlier in May, we had to completely shut down peanut and cotton planting and other crops because there was about a 5-day stretch where some parts of Georgia right in through here picked up over 15 inches of rainfall, and that got into parts of South Carolina as well. But if you look at it, your NDVI values peak in August and September. And so we're early in the season, and that's all we're doing. We're just taking an assessment early in the season. What about South Carolina? Again, South Carolina's crop is just a hair above where it was a year ago, but it should also reach a peak right around the end of July and August. And then finally, if we come over to North Carolina, once the data loads here, we can see that North Carolina, we are actually higher back in mid-May. And as we got into this third and final fourth week of May, we've seen the numbers come down a bit. But I like to just do this because you compare it to a year ago and really kind of just get a baseline over where you are with your most recent crop season in mind. Okay. So now that we've seen that, let's get out here and talk about where we're going over the next 5 to 7 days. There's another low, and you can see here that while much of the Midwest and the Canadian Prairie and the Northwest United States are going to be drier, we're looking at above average precipitation continuing. So this is a 5-day map. This would be day 7. So this is all the way out to next Monday. And you can see the wetter conditions that are being forecast for us. But I'll show you the timing of that in a moment. But take a look at this. If you only look at day 4 through 10, we're actually a little bit drier. So that means most of what you just saw in the 5 and 7 day forecast is coming now in the near term with another big cutoff low. And then we start to flip this pattern around. And that pattern flip that's going to be happening in that day 4 to 10 time period is going to be sending the jet more like this. And that's what's going to open up this opportunity for another part of the country to get some moisture while we get a chance to kind of slow down a bit, maybe get some heat back into this crop as well. So I wanted you to see that kind of mix there. But overall, if you just said, oh, show me the next 10 days, well, it looks wet, but it's the timing that is everything. We're going to explore that in a few moments. Thankfully, I don't have a whole lot of severe weather risk coming your way. This is going to be some broader clouds, showers, storms versus those hyper-local severe weather events. But I want to show you what April looked like. April was not overly busy for us in the Southeast. And remember, one of the analog years we were concerned about was 2011. And 2011 is not panning out to be a strong analog year anymore. Remember, 2011 ripped us to shreds at the end of April. And we did not see that. But May picked back up, and we had quite a bit of severe storm activity in parts of the Carolinas and northern Georgia. But this is what the stats look like. And if you just want to see the annual stats, we are way above average on severe wind reports, more than double. We're well above average on hail reports across the country. And we're already over 1,000 reports of tornadoes. And we're just in the middle of our tornado season, which goes through June and July as well. So March, April, May, June, July. It doesn't mean we can't have hurricanes, we'll talk about hurricanes in a minute, but it doesn't mean we can't have tornadoes later in the season. It's just the peak. And I'm telling you, this has been an extremely, extremely active year, but just not as extreme in the Southeast as it has been in the Mid-South, in the Midwest, which is what you can see here. Now, temperature-wise, just take a look at this. This is how May has shaped up so far. Now, we've been above average in temperatures on the whole for May along our coastal areas here, okay? Down into Florida, very warm. But it's actually been quite cool at times in parts of the Midwest. We're just coming off of a very, very cold weekend. In fact, I went over to the Indianapolis 500 on Sunday, and it was one of the coldest 500s we've had in a long time. In fact, I think 1992 was maybe the last time we had one this chilly. But don't worry, 1992 is not an analog year to 2025. It's just a coincidence for that particular day. Over the next 5 days, we're still going to be cooler. Okay, you can see the influence here in the midsection of the country all the way over to the Carolinas and Georgia, staying cool. This would be day 5 through 10. We still hang on while there's a big warm-up that's happening in the Midwest. But overall, the next 10 days are not warm. Let me rephrase that. They're not as warm as they could be for this time of year. And we just need to consider that when we think about how we're putting heat on this crop right now. Okay? So let me get down to kind of the big story here. Where am I taking you in this forecast video? This graphic right here is one that I wake up every morning, and it is in my cadence of maps to look at, or graphs to look at. And it tells me one thing. What the colors represent, and then the line on the bottom, is something called the vertical, you can read the title with me, the vertical and zonal integral of total atmospheric angular momentum. It is how the atmosphere is moving with respect to the Earth's rotation. Understand? So sometimes pieces of the atmosphere pick up momentum and they're faster. When that occurs, we tend to see these colors, and that gives us more circumglobal troughs that progress east. Okay, so more active weather. Whenever we see these colors show up, especially right in through the mid-latitudes, which are here in the northern hemisphere, see there's the latitude is on the y-axis. We tend to get more ridges. And what's been odd, this is what's fascinating, is that in April and then into the beginning of May, see this long stretch in through here of below normal momentum? That was when the jet went way up into Canada. We would have predicted dryness across a big section of the country if it were not for those cutoff lows. Now, here's what I'm worried about. In spring, you can get that. But if this is the beginning of another one of those that just goes, it'll go off the page here. But if this is the beginning of another one, then we are going to be looking at a problem come midsummer, not for the Carolinas, but for the central United States. And it's all going to be due to the positional movement of the Bermuda High and the Pacific High and what could be a central United States ridge event. And if that occurs, it doesn't tend to get us. Now, keep that in the back of your mind as we go forward, because this is what I'm going to be watching. Since the beginning of May, you saw this a moment ago, the Pacific High has been there. The Bermuda High is weak. There's actually two pieces to it, maybe even three. There's one that comes up here. There's the one where I put the H, and there's another high that's over in the North Atlantic near Iceland to Ireland. Now, if the atmosphere loses that momentum, by the time we get into late June and July, you're going to see this high build here, and this trough of low pressure go there. And this high is going to deepen and move right to here. This low is going to move all the way off the southeast coast. And this, the Bermuda High, will probably either merge with this one, or it might come and sneak up here. Amazing how it'll all shift around. Now, that's a lot of ifs. I am counting on, in that scenario, the atmosphere just losing all of its flow once again. And that is so skeptical. It's a very skeptical forecast. And I don't have a lot to back it up, other than some historical precedents, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So now, you see where I'm going with this. Let's get through the near term, and then I'll come back to that in a few minutes. Over the next 7 days, we've got more rain coming. In fact, just take a look at the country here for the next 7 days. Here is the southeast. We got chances for picking up another 1 to 2 inches easily out of the low that's coming through right now. So what you've got here is just an outlook on, on total precipitation as it rolls through. And it could be substantial in some places. Let's go have a look at what's causing this. Here's the low yesterday on Memorial Day. You had a lot of cloud cover, some storms to the south, but a lot of cloud cover in the middle part of the country as the sun was setting. And this thing blew up some huge storms down in Texas, big hailers, some couple of tornadoes. But it's going to move slowly here. And I do mean slowly, because where's the jet? It's way north. You can't even see it. In fact, it's interesting. As I looked north, I saw that. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are some substantial fires in parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And you can see them here. Look at that. That was on Sunday overnight. Look at the heat signature we got from the infrared. And then the next morning, the sun rose. This would have been on Memorial Day, our Memorial Day. And look at the smoke. Holy smokes. No pun intended there. But that's what's going on in Canada right now. A lot of wildfire smoke over this past weekend. So that tells you where the dryness is, where the jet stream is living, why it's missing. But that big low that's moving toward us, it's going to keep things wet. So if we just have a quick look here at some radar data, I'm just working on some new radar stuff. Big storms crossing down here in the lower Mississippi Valley. But if we kind of zoom in here on the Carolinas, this is just widespread scattered showers and a couple of embedded thunderstorms just rolling through, bringing in some wet weather here as we work our way into this Tuesday morning. All right, where's it all going? Well, this is where we think it'll be by early this afternoon, that big low watch. This is Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday. You've got chances of rain all the way to the end of the week just because of the persistence of this big low that's moving through. And here it is Friday. We're all the way out to Friday still have the chances for rain. Getting into the weekend. Now we're past the next 4 days, right? So now look for day 4 through 10. Much lower chances of rain, right? You still have chances, but it's not wet. Why? Big area of high pressure is in place right here. And so it's going to really limit the chances of us getting a lot of rainfall. Again, when does it start? Maybe Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then the pattern kind of flips around and makes things quite wet, in through this area, back into the Midwest and upper Midwest. That's out about a week. If we stretch it out 10 days and just look at some probability maps, the chances of us going over an inch are very high, right? What about the chances going over 2 inches? Well, in parts of Georgia, sections of South Carolina, most of this region of North Carolina, we've got a pretty high chance of having at least 2 inches of rain in the next 10 days. So we are still in a wetter pattern. And as we look out there at what that pattern looks like, just watch it here. So you see there's the pesky low that's cut off. Okay, there's another one over here that's cut off from, from the main ridge that's given us those Canadian wildfires. And as you play it forward, there it is. That's digging in by Friday. And that's what's going to push the wet weather. The wettest weather is always to the east of these lows. And on the backside, we start to bring in higher pressure and drier weather. That's always on the backside of a trough. So there it is. Now this is Sunday into Monday and Tuesday. And what's interesting is when we get out there, this is a pattern change. By early June, look at this trough ridge. So we're going to bring back in some heat finally. And what we're going to watch is systems just rip through the midsection of the country here. Now, what's interesting is sneaking around underneath all of this. You didn't really see it. Right there. Right there. See that? There's actually a tropical system that may be off the coast of Mexico. And it reminds me, I better tell you all about what I think this upcoming hurricane season is going to be. But first, real quick, this is the week 2 outlook. So most of the models see near normal to slightly drier than normal conditions for the Carolinas. Can you see it? I got 3 different models here. The CPC has got you near normal to wetter than normal, though. So we'll keep an eye on that, especially with how much moisture we've had lately. We have plenty to recycle back into the system. Temperature-wise, again, just wanted to point out how cool these last 7 days have been throughout much of the upper Midwest, getting into northern plains, Ohio Valley, right up here to the Appalachian Mountains, and then parts of North Carolina. Whereas Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, we've been on the hotter side of average. There's been a nice dividing line here on which these cutoff lows just seem to want to meander through. Okay. Taking a look at where the temperatures are expected to go, we're going to stay near normal to below normal most of this week. So just take a look. Now, that's not southern Georgia, but I'm thinking of the Carolinas. This is today's highs compared to average. There's tomorrow, so 90s down here, but 70s and 80s here. Then we get up to Thursday, again, cooler. Why? Cloud cover's coming through. That's the front finally passing us on Friday. The trough then leaves, and the cooler weather sinks in behind it. And I mean, yeah, technically speaking, at the end of May, 90 is right about average for here. But for us to be in the mid-70s to the mid-80s, that's actually a little cooler than average for what we can get this time of year. All the heat's in the west, and they're going to start to see heat warnings showing up in California's Central Valley here as we finish this month of May and start the month of June. Now, on a grander scale, here's the next 5 days. So there's your cooler risk, okay? And then let's play it forward through day 5 through 10. Now, we're going to be ending our cooler weather outlook once we get past this upcoming weekend into early next week. And then you'll see that day 10 through 15 starts to heat us back up again. And that's when the pattern starts to regain this shape where we're going to have the flow coming around this trough and over this ridge. And that's why we possibly see a little bit of a drier but hotter signal with just more pop-up thunderstorms in that area. Okay, that is your next 2 weeks. That'll get you halfway through, this next time period between when I get the forecast for you again. But what I want to show you after this is where it's all going. The Climate Prediction Center released this for June 7 to June 20. Very interesting forecast, in my opinion. A whole lot of heat in the Great Basin, the Rocky Mountains, Four Corners states. More heat in the upper Midwest. Dryness west, but not for us. And I told you at the beginning, I don't have any evidence at this point to tell you that you're going to settle into some sort of drought. Flash drought can happen any time of the year, but I'm talking about long-standing drought. So the Climate Prediction Center gave us this outlook. Let's shrink that up so you can see the whole thing. They have got the greatest risk of developing drought in the Midwest, upper Midwest, Western Corn Belt, all the way to Montana. You see, that's where drought already is. It's here and here. And they've got drought development likely in that area. And you can see that where we are, drought removal likely. I mean, this is important, what this forecast is showing. And I want to piece together why this is important. Remember earlier when I said, hey, the momentum changes are what's critical? When we tend to lose a lot of momentum in the atmosphere, historically, it doesn't seem to have the same impact on the Southeast as it does on the Midwest. And what typically happens is something like this. This is a forecast from the extended version of the European model. And I want to take you from June 4th to July 4th. July 4th is my favorite holiday. I'm on vacation with my family, and I'm concerned because we go way up here in northern Wisconsin. It's looking a bit wet, but it's also looking wet for you. And you can see where the atmosphere is attempting to kind of make a dividing line, right? Somewhere here to here, it's looking driest, wetter for us. And I want to show you why this might be the case. This is the 7-day sliding window. I'm going backward in time. Pressure anomalies. So there is the position as we get into the middle of June of the Pacific high. And there's a little bit of a Bermuda high here, but there's a bigger ridge up toward Iceland. Okay? Now watch, as we play forward, this is past the solstice. And here's what I'm concerned about. We've already seen that the Bermuda high is a bit shifted here. There's Bermuda, there's the Azores. It's more toward the Azores with higher pressure there. Now that is a red flag if you live here. But what would really make this bad is if this big Pacific high was way off the page. Then in the middle, we'll fill in a big area of high pressure. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have drawn those circles that way. They go this way. And what's interesting about that is if you plant high pressure in through here, which the model is not doing. I'm drawing over the top of the model, but it's not doing it. We tend to get ridge-running storms that come over the top of this, come right through the Carolinas, and they're met with flow that's way off this displaced Bermuda high, which means we tend to stay wet. Now, thinking all of that through, what's the 30-day outlook on temperatures look like? Let's get you out there again to the 4th of July. It's got the greatest risk of heat in the central part of the United States. It doesn't even have us hotter than average. Now, it's still hot and steamy in summer. That's called the southeast summer. We're familiar with that. But right now, no major call for extremely hot summer conditions. I'm talking about persistent, crazy hot weather. Nope, it's not here. It's here. Let's keep building on this. It's having anything to do with La Nina. Now, I'm going to show you as we start to wrap up this video 2 different ways of looking at ocean temperatures. This one is looking at the current ocean temperatures and comparing them to the current global average, not the historical, but the current global average. So I'm really just trying to look for contrast, like look how cool it is there versus here. That's going to be important discussion in a few moments for the hurricane season. But La Nina, the evidence of its effect this winter and early spring, still there, but it's this cold water here that I'm watching. Now we call this region the PMM. And when this gets cold, while this stays cold, and if that gets cold, this gets hot. And we tend to stay wet. Now, keep that in the back of your mind. There's other things here. There's the Central Pacific warmth plus the Western Pacific warm pool. All of these things influence what's going on, but I want to focus specifically on this very cold water right in through here. Because is it a part of La Nina? No. La Nina will be an INSO neutral, so no La Nina, through summer. See, all the graphics say the same thing. INSO neutral through summer. Now, do we have to worry about La Nina this fall? Yes, but we'll save that for another video. What I want you to see is when that water is cold off of the California coast, our greatest risk of being drier in June, July, August is primarily here. Sometimes it gets through the Ohio Valley over toward the Appalachian Mountains. But the risk factor is mainly in the central United States based on that cold water there. What about if we looked at temperatures? Temperatures tend to be hottest. Now, I know this is going to be weird, but they tend to be hottest where the colors are blue. You're saying, why? Well, the water temperatures are cold, which reverses the correlation. You see that? It's a negative correlation with it. So this means this would be hot, and this would be cool. It's weird, but that's how the color bar works. Notice we don't have anything. So what's going to be most critical to watch going forward are those ocean temperatures. And to prove to you that the models are kind of hooked up on this is what they've got for June, July, and August. And this is precipitation anomalies. You can see it as clear as I can. They've got greater risk of being drier here and wetter for us. Now, when I say wetter, I mean stormier. And you understand just as well as I do that when those summer thunderstorms come through, everybody doesn't get a drink of rain, right? We have highly localized precipitation during our summer convective time period. So just keep that in mind. But it's echoed also in the new forecast that came out June, July, August for the Climate Prediction Center. Let's blow that up so you can see a little bit better. Look at that. Versus here. And it's out there in July, August, September as well. Temperature-wise, they're trying to keep all the greatest heat. Southern Plains Great Basin. That's June, July, August. Here's July, August, September. Now, we're going to have a good hot summer. I think we're going to have normal hot summer. I just think the greatest risks are not over us here in the Carolinas, down into Georgia. So that gets me to the end of this. I want to show you another way of looking at ocean temperatures. This map is where you look at the current ocean temperatures and you compare them to the historical average. okay? Not the current, not today's global mean, but the historical long-range average. You can still see that negative PMN, but I'm going to focus right here as we start to wrap this up. A year ago, that's how warm the Atlantic was. And a year ago, when that was going on, our forecast for August, September, October was for a very active hurricane season. Look at how much moisture the model was attempting to put down with repeated low pressure systems a year ago. And we saw it. We saw a super active hurricane season, and I don't need to relive it for you. You were there. But take a look at this year. That's August, September, October. Right now, the model has this whole region drier, meaning that this could be the year where we're having a lot of discussion about these homegrown systems, ones that rapidly intensify near the coast and are also born near the coast. And I bring that up because even though you don't see the main development region showing above average, you've got our forecast, like the newest one that just came out from NOAA, still looking at a 60% chance of being above normal. That's 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 5 majors. If you're curious what average is, it's 14, 6, and 3. Okay? So you see how they're leaning toward the above average. Colorado State University, and this is where we'll stop. This is their most up-to-date forecast. This is what they're continuing to call for the 2025 season. So if average is 14.4, they got 17 named systems. And in every category, as we go down here, they continue to stay with above average risk this year. We're a part of this longer term trend, this time period of above average hurricane season in the Atlantic, and they're continuing it. And we'll keep an eye on this. We'll watch for what this might possibly mean as we go forward. And next month, we'll have a much clearer picture. So I'm very much looking forward to my forecast for you at the end of June, as we will have a solid picture on where that Bermuda high is, what the momentum is doing, and what the hurricane season could end up looking like. So you've got the setup. We'll watch it together. Talk to you in a month. Thanks.